webinars and this month focusing on water. Could someone just give me a thumbs up if that screen's being shared with the presentation? Everyone's cameras are off. Desi, can you see the presentation?
Yep, all looks good, Tar. I've made it so people
good.
can share their screens and comment if they like to.
Excellent. Look, happy for people either to just butt in with any questions, raise your hand electronically, or slip some questions into the chat, and I'll get Desley and Sophie just to keep an eye on those. Firstly, we don't know what's happened. We know some people have had some issues in trying to register for this webinar, where others have been able to just register straight through. It seems to be one of those little glitches in the system that our IT people haven't tracked down. So apologies if that was causing a problem for you, but hopefully we'll be able to move on with any great problems in future. Look, it really is just an opportunity to provide you an update on what's happening in the wonderful world of water. And you know, this is sort of the second full this year. Some of it might look very familiar because some of this stuff moves relatively slowly and other things move pretty quickly. So we'll just go through these key ones that are listed here on the screen. If we look at the risk and where things are up to, I still feel that our highest risk collectively, although it's it is located in a particular area, is the New South Wales government's New South Wales Northern Basin Connectivity Review. And when we last did this, we actually had this at the highest risk level. And I have downgraded it slightly because the New South Wales government formally asked the federal government to fund any compensation or payments that would be required to make this happen. And the federal government has come back and said, no, we're not interested in doing that. And the New South Wales government has very little money. We kind of were expecting the New South Wales Minister, Rose Jackson, who admitted that, that this is the response that they got from the federal government, to have come out by now with some sort of announcement as what she's likely to do or not do. If I had a suspicion, it would be that she might implement a relatively small part of the range of recommendations, but not go through with all of it. But there's also whispers now that if anything's going to happen at all, it'll happen after the New South Wales state election in March. And you look at that two ways. Maybe from an irrigator's perspective, she doesn't want to give the irrigation community bad news in the run-up election. I'd probably lean more to the fact that she may not want to be giving the environmental groups bad news before the election, because they're obviously a much bigger slice of the voting market. So anyhow, it is a watch and see. The other high risk, and we'll know more about this towards the end of the year, is the federal 605 adjustment. I probably jumped ahead of some of my slides. I might play catch up there, and we'll go through each of those points in a little bit more detail later. But the good news is, since we last spoke, water availability across the basin and indeed outside the basin has started to improve. So on the 1st of July, within the basin, total percentage of water in headwater storages was 51% of capacity. That's now risen to 61%, with the greatest improvements occurring in the southern basin, and we're seeing some good inflows into the Murray-Murrumbidgee and now getting some opening allocations. The other one worth noting, and I noticed we've got at least one or two members from up in the Central Highlands, while Fairburn Dam still has got plenty of space for more water. They've probably had the best opening allocation that they've had for some time at 50%. So that's a good start, but plenty of room for improvement up there. Obviously, I haven't listed all valleys here on this slide, but it's a fairly good cross-section of where things are at. Now, from a Cotton Australia perspective, our first stab at how much cotton we might be able to produce based on water availability, which we did probably back in May, had us at a crop probably in the 2.7 million bales, well down from the 4.5 million or so bales that we'll have picked in the crop that's been ginned at the moment. However, when we do that next, I think we'll see that number moving up. Maybe not moving up massively, but might be getting in around that 3 or low 3 million mark. I started talking earlier about the Northern Basin Connectivity Review and why things have changed and that risk level I've dropped slightly. As I said, it's largely about the conversations, formal conversations between the New South Wales government and the federal government, and the federal government making it clear that they do not intend to fund it. And we had the New South Wales Minister Rose Jackson at New South Wales Irrigators Council's meetings in early July. She was very upfront about that. She did indicate then that she thought she'd be making some sort of announcement in the coming weeks. That still hasn't occurred. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, some of the more recent whispers are that she may have instructed the department to do some more modelling, and the outcome of that modelling is unlikely to be consulted on until post the New South Wales state election. But as you can see in those numbers there, if the independent panel's recommendations were fully adopted, it would have had a catastrophic effect on some of those valleys, particularly the border rivers Namoi and the Guayra. With the Murray-Darling Basin Plan review, there was over 2,400 submissions put in, and interestingly, while it's a large number of submissions, there was only about 1,000 that were deemed to be templated or campaign generated ones. So just to put that into a little bit of perspective, recently over in WA, they have started working on their water resource plan for the Fitzroy Derby River system, way up there in the top end of WA. And they had over 52,000 submissions, of which almost the entirety were from a campaign generated environmental campaign process. Now, those numbers are huge. I think governments on the whole are very aware that they campaign generated, and the content don't get probably anywhere near the same degree of recognition as individually written submissions. But I guess you've also got to be aware of, and saying that Fitzroy Derby one was that there was at least 52,000 odd people that were interested enough in the process to hit whatever buttons were required to lodge a submission. So that's got to have some sort of impact. I noticed that Lou Gall from GVIA has put something in the chat there about the New South Wales Connectivity Review, that the federal minister doesn't support the rule changes. And by New South Wales, they thought the cost might have been the order of 350 million. When we had done our back of the envelope type calculations, I think we landed at somewhere between 1.3 and 1.6 billion dollars. So either way, there doesn't seem to be money in the coffers. We did have, for those that were able to come to the Cotton Conference a fortnight ago, we had Andrew McConville present there as part of the water panel. It was very interesting in his answers to one of the questions, and I've highlighted it there. It's about maximising the value of that portfolio. Have we got better land and water management together? Have we simplified the rules? Have we given communities the power to take up local solutions? He said. I think we have to move beyond water recovery. Water recovery was necessary to get to a point. We're well beyond that point now. It's about using what we will have well. Now, the review, won't be formally delivered till December 9, but hopefully we will see more of that emphasis coming through, with that focus moving away from any requirement to acquire more water to better using the water that the federal government already has. And I was reminded today in a different meeting that when it comes to assets held by the Commonwealth Government, apparently the water portfolio is now the second biggest single asset held by the government just behind, well, probably well behind, but behind the defence portfolio. And that's quite amazing that, that's the sort of amount of water that they have tied up. On that. The other big thing that will happen within the Murray-Darling Basin Plan later this year is the Fidland reconciliation. So that's at 605 GLs of downwater. So we remember that the basic numbers, the original numbers of the Basin Plan was 2750 of water recovery required, and then we had the 450 up water added at the last minute. And then there was this opportunity to reduce water recovery by originally 650 GLs and then landed on 605 by doing various projects. Now, unfortunately, those projects, for a whole range of reasons, are going to come up a long way short of delivering the equivalent of 605. They're probably going to come up 300 to 350 GLs short. And under the rules, the minister could simply step in and say, well, I'm just going to acquire that water through the market. Fortunately, Minister Watt has indicated that he's probably not of the view that they want to do that. He probably doesn't have the funds to do that, even if he wanted to. He did say in a meeting that Cotton Australia had with him that his broad options, or both ends of his options have got is do nothing, or at the other end, step in the market and buy it all back. He said he didn't believe either of those were acceptable and have to land in somewhere in between. So in October, the authority will release their first cut on just what that shortfall will be. There'll be some opportunity to consult to make sure that get any feedback as to whether the inputs in the model were right. But then there's also going to be an opportunity, I think, for irrigator groups collectively to work with the minister on a solution that minimises any further impacts on our irrigation communities. We have the National Water Act review going on at the moment. Submissions for that close towards the end of the month. We've had a number of briefings from the relatively new reviewer on this. It seems that he wants to take. Well, it was interesting. He said he's not a incrementalist. He's probably more of a reformer. But at the same time, or almost in the next breath, he said he wasn't looking at doing super major changes. But what we really need to be very mindful of is any changes that give either greater weighting to climate change, take more of I'll put in inverted commas, a precautionary approach, because we'd strongly argue that the current water allocation systems already very adequately take into any climate change or climate variability. And there is going to be, and will continue to be, a much greater focus on Indigenous water rights, but just how they play out are probably the two key risks that we have now. I don't want to be alarmist about either of them. I think there's ways forward that don't necessarily do damage to our water property right, but there is certainly a risk that if they're addressed poorly, that could be very much a outcome. So that's certainly an ongoing work, and one that's very much a focus of not only Cotton Australia, but all the peak and local irrigation groups. With Menindee Lakes and the Section 324 trigger, you'll be aware that there is what I call it, a shadow embargo, I guess, on accessing unregulated water, supplementary water, and floodplain harvesting water at the moment. It's in place, but it doesn't formally take place unless the active storage in Menindee falls below 250 GLs. And it was below that amount, I think, in late April, early May. Since then, it's been hovering above that amount, and as of this morning, it was sitting 12 GLs above at 260 GLs. We've also discussed in the past the National Water Agreement, an update to the National Water Initiative. The federal government signed it. To our knowledge, still none of the state governments have signed it. However, while there is certainly no enthusiasm from the state governments to sign it, and I will say we're unlikely to sign it until the federal government puts on the table some money to help us implement it. The other genuine risk here is that the federal government has made it reasonably clear to the states that if you want water infrastructure funding, including for upgrades to town water supplies and the like, that will be contingent on you signing the National Water Agreement. So I think it's fair to say that at some point a minister will buckle, and that will be signed. Now, having said that, and I think there's talk that the final version is to be released. I haven't seen it released yet. We're all working, including on the National Water Act review, on a draft version that was released probably 18 months or so ago now. I don't think the National Water Agreement would be devastating in any way to the irrigation industry, but it seems to put a whole lot of extra, in my view, unnecessary work on the state governments to comply, and that in itself just seems foolish. And there's certainly in that agreement, touching on a couple of those key issues, there is more of a recognition of climate change and more of a recognition of Indigenous water rights. If we slip over into New South Wales, the IPART water pricing review came out a month or two ago. Very disappointing in that 12 months or 18 months ago, IPART, as the independent regulator, came down very hard on Water New South Wales and limited very much the increases they were seeking, and decided to go into this additional review phase. Unfortunately, they've come out, and in most valleys we're seeing water charges increase up to 10% a year for the next 4 years, plus CPI. It's in itself a decision that can't be undone at this stage, but the New South Wales Irrigators Council and through its members are calling for the New South Wales government to undertake a real root and branch review of water pricing and try to drive those efficiencies. And as an aside, the Queensland government has had a major shake-up of the board of Sunwater, and have created a board subcommittee for irrigation, and that subcommittee has already identified $20 million worth of ongoing savings that they would like to cut out. So I mention that now only in that there's probably is opportunities through that root and branch review to reduce that. We're working, and to be fair, New South Wales Irrigators Council is taking very much the lead on that, but Cotton Australia has been an active member of two subcommittees, one working on trying to make the floodplain management plan application process more efficient. So currently that's mainly an issue in the Murrumbidgee and Murray valleys, just trying to make it a lot more sensible the way that process rolls out. And particularly Water New South Wales under Rob O'Neill seems to be keen to make some real differences. He does see some areas where he can make improvements. He also, I suppose, tries to temper people's expectations that some of this will be a slow burn. Likewise, we're working on trying to improve the groundwater trade process, which has become very slow and bureaucratic. There are pluses and minuses. Some things that look like a really good idea to speed up trades may have some unintended consequences for irrigators. So we are progressing that carefully and relatively slowly. And as I touched on earlier, New South Wales election is, I think it's early March 2027. So we'll basically expect government's legislative agenda to really start slowing up from now on. and putting things on the back burner until after the election. What is also happening, and really, for irrigators, you need to make sure that you or your representatives are across the various changes that may be made, but there's a whole bunch of New South Wales water sharing plans up for review. Currently, the most advanced are the Murray Lower Darling, the Lachlan and the Murrumbidgee. They're likely to go to public exhibition before the end of the year. And then the next batch being the Macquarie, the Namoi and the Guida with public exhibition after the election. However, I was on a Teams meeting the other day where, say, for example, the department had reached out to Namoi Valley irrigators to start the conversation as what is likely to be in scope and not in scope. So, people do need to be aware of this. The Border Rivers one is due to be remade in 2031, but that might get pushed out to 2033. And the Barwon Darling one was actually remade this year, so there's a 10-year time frame for the next one. Crossing over into Queensland, probably the biggest active issue at the moment is the Queensland government instructed the Queensland Competition Authority to undertake a review as to whether or not a regulated asset-based approach to asset renewal would provide a better long-term result than the annuity method, which we've been using in Queensland for some time. The authority released a draft report, I think now it was last month. That draft report really did not come down strongly one way or another. It probably gave a slight tick to the RAB in terms of risk management, but actually agreed at the very least, and we take a different view, but at the very least, over the long term, it comes out with a neutral outcome. And, we've got our own work that we commissioned collectively through QFF using an independent consultant that shows that you end up with a worse result over the long term. You can certainly get some reduction in charges in the first period, so maybe in the first 0 to 10 years, you could get a little bit of sugar hit, but long term you'll end up paying more. And the work we did significantly more. And if we look across the border in New South Wales, where they've had a RAB approach for some time, that certainly is the message there. So we'll continue to support the retention of the annuity approach, and for government and Sunwater, and to a lesser extent SEQ Water, we have some cotton growing clients serviced by them, really should be focusing not so much on the methodology, but on driving significant efficiencies in the way we do that. And as I touched on earlier, been a huge shake-up on the Sunwater board, and at least at the moment, they seem to be focused on trying to drive efficiencies. I should have mentioned when talking about New South Wales, Craig Knowles, former water minister back in the probably the 2004 maybe through to 2007 in New South Wales, and then the inaugural chair of the Natural Resource Access Regulator, has just been appointed as the new chair of Water New South Wales. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing for us, I think that remains to be seen. Other couple of key things happening in Queensland is running semi-concurrently in the Fitzroy Basin in central Queensland. There is the regional water assessment for that part of the world, and also a review and renewal of the water resource plan. We've been certainly engaging directly with the department and also through our irrigator groups in Emerald and cotton grower associations in Emerald and Theodore on making sure that concerns are dealt with there. There's, I think some good news in the Fitzroy. It looks like there'll be continued long-term access in one way or another to the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve water, which has made a huge difference, probably added another 70 to 80,000 megalitres that can be regularly utilised in that valley. And, we've seen that in throughput through the Mara cotton gin has increased from around about 30,000 bales to well over 100,000. But there is also a little bit of a risk there to security, medium priority security for irrigators in the Emerald District, with some talk of making some rule changes to underpin Emerald's town water supply. And we've been very firm that if that is required at all, it should be done either through infrastructure investment or through water purchases, rather than through any changes to rule changes that will have impact on current entitlement holders. There's a similar process going on in the Gulf and Flinders region, and we see that largely as a positive, with some greater opportunities likely for water harvesting and improved access to overland flow. And it fits neatly into the Queensland government's ambition under their Prosper 2050 plan to grow the output of Queensland agriculture. Last time and through any other calls, been really putting a shout out, particularly for those members that live and operate within the Murray-Darling Basin, to think about nominating for the Murray-Darling Basin Leadership Program. Now, this program is supported and paid for, and apparently it's worth about $23,000 a spot by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, but it is being delivered by the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. So it is very much a genuine leadership opportunity. It is also an opportunity for people closely involved in water in the basin to have a better understanding or a wider understanding of what are the issues that go right across the industry. So I really would encourage people to apply. I think there were 3 cohorts. The first one has started. Technically, the applications for the second cohort have closed, although I'm aware of someone who just got accepted this week, so there might be still some places available. And then cohort 3, which will commence in 2027, that's definitely still open for application. So I'd really encourage people to apply for that. It's important as an industry that we're represented. It is a good opportunity to build your leadership skills, and also importantly, it's a good opportunity to make contact with other people that over the coming years will probably be relatively influential in how the whole Murray-Darling Basin plan plays out. One that I probably should have had in the specific Queensland section is I really want to encourage irrigators to get on and apply for their 15% discount through Queensland Rural Industry Authority. I know it's a bit of a process. It's not the process that we asked for, but take-up has still been very low. And if we go to government and say that water prices are too high, and they turn around and say, oh, well, we gave you the opportunity of a 15% discount and people didn't take it up, it certainly makes that argument that prices are too high. Now, I've got to declare, technically, you could wait till close to the end of 2027 and just apply and get a single rebate on all your water bills since the 1st of July 2026. You only have to get certified once. So I'd really encourage you, now that it's been running for a year and you've probably actually got 5 water bills, please apply. It should be straightforward. It certainly, on the whole, people have said that it has been straightforward. Every now and then someone's had a bit of a glitch, but please apply and let's lift those numbers. Now, there's something else at play here, and it's not formally government policy yet, but they are openly talking about that after this discount technically runs out on the 30th of June 27, that they may introduce a system where, unless you are a certified irrigator, you will not be eligible for the regulated water charges. And in effect, and I'll put very much in inverted commas, you'll have to negotiate your prices with Sunwater. And I can imagine how those how those negotiations will go. So, yeah, if you're certified now to get your discount, you will be certified going forward. So I really can't emphasise enough that would be great to see action on that. Not extensive, but this is a recent update now. Total numbers compared to total number of irrigators. So only for Sunwater, only 441 irrigators out of 4,500 have actually applied. Now, when we look at the percentage of water allocations that they cover, it's a better outcome with 35% of the allocations actually being covered, but that's still only 1/3, and I really think we could increase that activity, and I'd really like to see it increase rapidly, as much as anything else, for the messaging about the sheer unaffordability of water prices. In June this year, we hosted a strategic briefing by former Labor politician, Shadow Ag Minister Mick Veitch, on how better to engage with government in general, both federal and state. But of course, he had particular insights around the New South Wales government. That led us to formalising an engagement strategy. Much of it is what we've always done in the past, but some of it is new. And I guess what he really emphasised is, while there's very few rurally located members in most parliaments, often when you dig into the background of individual members, you can find that they may have grown up on a farm, their families might still be on farms, and they have some sort of link. And it's important to try and get them on side, so when they go into their party room discussions, they've got some understanding. So we'll continue to work on that. And as one recent example, again, we've done these things before, but about a month ago now, we had a couple of New South Wales upper house members, and we were able to take them out to the Macquarie Marshes and immerse them both in some irrigation issues, but also in the use of environmental water. We did kick around for a while, and I think we may have mentioned on one of these briefings in the past. We discussed it briefly at the last general meeting, and then also we've been engaging more closely with the chairs of our cotton grower associations. We considered forming a formal water policy committee for Cotton Australia, but on reflection, we won't do that, mainly because most valleys, or many valleys, have strong existing valley-based irrigator groups, and the growers in those areas felt that we would be duplicating effort and duplicating representation and taking up people's time. But what we will do in those areas where they don't have that group, or where they want us to, we'll engage more directly with the CGAs on water issues. And we've had one opportunity already up in the Central Highlands where we're able to facilitate a little bit of, I suppose we'd almost call it Water Policy 101 briefing, and that's resulted in the Central Highlands CGA creating their own water subcommittee. And we're going to do something similar out at St. George on the 14th of September. Just a bit of staffing update. I'm actually going to be finishing up with Cotton Australia on the 20th of November, and recruitment is underway. Indeed, as speak, I think Adam and some of the board members are interviewing for a replacement general manager in Sydney. So hopefully we'll be able to announce a successful candidate in the not too distant future. And there is also recruitment underway for a water policy officer. So that will in effect be an additional resource. We are hoping that the new general manager will come with strong water policy and advocacy credentials, and there'll be this extra resource as well. So watch that as that plays out. Some of our key regular activities that are coming up. So there's a roundtable being convened by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority in September. Hopefully that will give us some further insights as to where the basin plans reviews going. Part of that engagement strategy is that in New South Wales we'll be running a, hopefully New South Wales Irrigation Council taking the lead, looks to be running a Taste of the State event in New South Wales Parliament, again trying to engage with those politicians that we may not normally engage with. And NIC is looking at doing something very similar in the federal parliament, maybe November this year, maybe early next year. Again, just trying to engage with those politicians that aren't day to day tied up with water. Got our standard meetings, and what I don't have here, because when we do have them very regularly, is that we're very involved in Queensland with the Queensland Farmers Federation Water and Energy Policy Committee. It's by far their most active committee and meets most months. Yeah, I suppose just a couple of major call outs there. So love you to come on board, those that are interested in applying for that leadership program. Yeah, no good news on the pricing in IPART. I should have added here that really strong call out for Queenslanders to apply for that 15% discount. And you know, we're certainly not backing our way from recognising that water is by far the policy issue that comes up most when we meet either independently with growers or with the through the general meetings and cotton grower associations. Just a little couple of summaries that you can read for yourself there. Should have actually updated that basin-wide water availability has improved. It's now actually up to 61%. Missed that for the update. Any questions? And I do see there's a couple in the chat. With the Water Act review, could you please comment on legislative capabilities of the issues raised, given water is managed by the states from Lou Gore? Yeah, it is an interesting one that when the whole Murray-Darling Basin Plan started, and to make it happen, the federal government had to create the Water Act, and they relied largely on the external affairs powers, which basically said they've got to meet international commitments, and that saw us them leaning on things like the Ramsar wetland conventions to say, look, we need to do this, and you need to sign over some of your powers. I think in today's world, where the federal government rightly went through acquiring water through the market or similar voluntary and at market-based prices, even if it was based on efficiency programs, that if the government really wanted to do a major review, they could tidy that up completely, and they could say, well, okay, we don't actually need those powers. We'll just have our Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, and that can hold water and they can use it. I don't think they're going to go that way, Lou. I think we'll still see the states having to deliver water resource plans for the authority to accredit. But I do hope and expect that that process will become a lot more simplified. I'm not too sure whether you had anything else that specifically you were getting at there, but yeah, it would be good if you wanted to touch on that. That seemed to have covered that. Please, Barnett, you put Seek into the chat. I'm not quite sure whether that was a question or is there anything more you wanted to add there? And Lou has also added into the chat a link for financial support for the New South Wales telemetry uplift program. So, of course, most meter holders now need to have telemetry, and there is some assistance. To be honest, I'm not really across the detail, but happy to take any other questions if people want to raise their hands or drop it into the chat or just jump on the mic. If not, we might wrap up. And look, thank you very, very much for participating. And yeah, we'll have another webinar next week, next month. I'm not sure whether we've formally landed on the topic for that, but watch for that in the inbox. This has been recorded, and I think we'll have a link in this week's Cotton Matter. So please feel free to share it. But thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. And let us know if there's specific topics that people would like to hear about for webinars. We're always looking for different speakers to come on board.
And
Thanks.
it can be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be anything directly that Cotton Australia is doing. Obviously, the ones that we've done around HR and OH&S have been very, very popular. But if you've got other topics that you'd like us to explore, just please shoot it through to us. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, leave you all to it. Thank you.